Well, the blame game never ends with these people. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson is blaming Republicans for the mess going on in his city with the migrant crisis. Check it out.
The right-wing extremism in this country has targeted democratically ran cities. And quite frankly, they've been very intentional about going after democratically ran cities that are led by people of color. And their whole motivation is to create disruption and chaos, because that's what that particular party has been about. Right? This is the same political party that did not want to accept that President Obama was actually an American. It's the same Republican right-wing extremism that stormed the Capitol. It's the same right-wing extremism that refuses to accept the results of the Civil War. It's raggedy. It's disrespectful. It's mean-spirited. It's an unclean spirit, quite frankly. And so I got you. I just want to make sure that people understand what we're facing. That's why it's so important that the faith community is leaning in.
This guy is such a clown. So he brings up January 6th, saying this is the same right-wing extremism that stormed the Capitol. These are the same people that didn't want to accept President Obama as president. He's an American. The same people that didn't want to accept the results of the Civil War. What is this guy talking about? He's a clown. So we'll get into what a sanctuary city is, because he also didn't mention in that moment that Chicago is a sanctuary city. We're not sending people to these cities because they're run by black mayors. That has nothing to do with it. We'll get into that after we watch some video of what's going on in Chicago and why residents are outraged.
The wind chill in Chicago overnight dipped into the single digits. The mayor's promise to get homeless people into shelters and out of their outdoor tents so far has been unfulfilled. Correspondent Garrett Tenney is in Chicago tonight.
This notion that somehow there's been a lack of information or transparency, I call false on that.
Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson defending his handling of the migrant crisis as temperatures drop below freezing and more than 1,000 migrants are sleeping in tents on the streets and the floors of police stations. Today, Johnson moving forward with construction of a pop-up tent shelter he promised to have by winter. Despite fierce opposition, protest, and lawsuits from folks who live in that South Side neighborhood.
This mayor is acting like a dictator. He needs to go. He must go.
There's no transparency from the mayor.
When you think about all the things that we allow to slide, this is another thing that, we just can't allow this to happen.
Asked about protests against migrant shelters across his sanctuary city, including many in predominantly black and heavily Democrat neighborhoods, Johnson is blaming Republicans, anti-black racism, former mayor and fellow Democrat Lori Lightfoot, and right-wing extremists.
We're not going to break away from our value system because right-wing extremism is sowing seeds of discord in this city.
With winter moving in, a group of local churches is stepping up where the city has failed and getting migrants off the streets into temporary housing with food, clothes, and social services.
And we get the urgency because it is cold. Chicago's cold. So it's important for us to sound the alarm, wave the flag, and say, listen, we got to jump in on this and serve folks.
The mayor's office says the soonest its tent shelter will be ready is mid-December. And with limited capacity at churches, that means the city will still be scrambling to find a place for hundreds of migrants left out in the cold.
Wow. So, like I said, he's blaming right-wing extremism on this issue. But Chicago is a sanctuary city. What does that mean? Says Chicago has been a self-proclaimed sanctuary city for more than 38 years, with 5 mayors vowing to shield all immigrants in Chicago from federal agents, regardless of whether they are citizens, permanent residents, or asylum seekers. While Mayor Brandon Johnson says Chicago will remain a welcoming city for immigrants, those protections are nonetheless facing intense scrutiny as city officials struggle to house, feed, and care for more than 18,500 people who have made their way to Chicago from the southern border as of October 19th. Many reached Chicago on buses paid for by Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott as part of a concerted effort to damage President Joe Biden's chances for re-election and divide Democrat voters. So I can tell you that they are partially right about that. Part of the motivation is to get rid of Joe Biden. It's to expose what is going on at the border. and to let people see how much of an issue this is. Also, to let the Democrat run cities deal with this, since they want to be sanctuary cities, take the problem away from the cities in Texas, the communities in Texas, and put the burden on these Democrat-run cities who are self-proclaimed sanctuary cities and want to take them in. Now they can't deal with it. And yes, partially, I believe it is driven to get rid of Joe Biden, to let people know what's going on, get him out of office if they don't take it from us. You know what I mean? Anyway, yeah. But this is not meant to divide Democrat voters like this article says. You can see people are fed up right here in Chicago. This was back in May, and they're at the city council meeting. Citizens are outraged over migrant funding. Check it out.
At times so heated, police had to step in. We're talking about city council today and a vote to spend $51 million on helping migrants here in Chicago. CBS 2 political investigator Dana Kosloff was there for all the action, and Dana, strong feelings all around.
Yeah, Erica, and for many different reasons. Among them, the fact that this $51 million approved today is only a short-term fix, and more money will be needed in just weeks.
We cannot continue to falsely pit communities against one another.
Deep emotional wounds coming to the surface.
As Black people who have been hurt continuously by the city and country it loves, it ain't our responsibility to take care of everybody else.
And anger.
We don't want to have to recall anybody. We don't want to have to protest anybody, but we are not going to be ignored, Brandon, Mayor Johnson.
Many in Chicago's Black community and the city council speaking out against spending $51 million to house migrants, asking when will the help for them finally become a reality.
And it cannot be put on the backs of the residents of Chicago without showing them that they're getting something out of this.
Mayor Brandon Johnson, presiding over his second full city council meeting, had to ask for calm more than once.
Will the Sergeant of Arms please restore some order?
Police also intervening at one point to allow the meeting to proceed. Ultimately, the measure passed with 34 votes. Many who voted to approve the money, like 49th Ward Alderwoman Maria Haddon, call this an immediate crisis that needs attention. But, she says, so do concerns of the city's Black residents.
Why are Black people in Chicago and some communities so angry? Why is all this kind of anti-immigrant sentiment coming up? And I want to explain to folks, it's because if we cared as much about Black people and had over the decades as we do about everyone else, we wouldn't be here.
But the money from a 2021 budget surplus will only last 1 month. Many alderpeople say it's time for a long-term plan and some state and federal help. With that, should taxpayers be concerned?
Oh, you're going to get no help from federal.
I think we should all be concerned anytime we're having to utilize this level of resources on a temporary situation, especially with not a real sight of federal support coming.
Hours after the meeting, Mayor Brandon Johnson offered no specifics.
We're going to have to dig in a little bit deeper in the city of Chicago, but that's going to be a collaborative approach.
As for a timeline for a long-term plan to deal with this issue, there isn't one. I'm live outside.
There is no long-term solution. She said it right there. The problem is Joe Biden. The problem is DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. He is the problem right there. These people want this chaos in the cities. They want to make this happen. They want people to flood the country. They want to allow the borders to be unsecured the way they should, because they want a permanent voting block. That's all it's about, a permanent voting block of Democrat voters to get them into office, to keep them in power. And that way we'll never see another Republican president ever again. This is a long-term game. This is a long-term game. They know they're playing the long game here. They know they want to bring children here, grandkids, and things like that. They want to bring generations here. This is a long-term game they're playing. Look, I have no problem with immigration, legal immigration, that is. The problem is illegal immigration, as I've said before. But the problem here lies in the voters, too. The voters of Chicago allow for this to happen. Look, if they didn't keep voting these morons in, they wouldn't be dealing with this right now. Because if they had a mayor that's gonna put their foot down and say, no, you're not turning this to a sanctuary city. You're not gonna send people to my city, and it would be tougher and pressure Joe Biden to do his job, which he's not going to. But you have somebody who's gonna take a tougher stance and is gonna put their citizens first, and that's what these people are upset about. But at the same time, Chicago is a very blue city, and they put these people into power at the state and local level. Illinois is a very blue state. It's very liberal, mostly because of Chicago. Chicago pretty much dominates everything that goes on in the state as far as the elections go. We have some red areas, rural areas, which are conservative, but then Chicago just eats up so much of that share of the vote. It's not even fair. So yeah, that's why these people keep gaining the power. They keep doing things. They want to say they're a sanctuary city, but then when the problem comes to them, they can't handle it, and they're building these places in neighborhoods, and citizens are outraged. At the same, like I said, it's also their fault too. So yeah, good job, Governor Abbott. Keep sending them to these blue cities and let them deal with the problem. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Take care.